Hi, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Conscious Grief series. Today, I am joined by Sara Cobb from My Grief Connection. Welcome, Sara.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
Good to be here.
It's so lovely to have you here. We met through Instagram during the last Conscious Grief series, and you were so generous and helpful with sharing this series with your audience, and then we connected and did an Instagram live, and I've listened to podcasts that you've been interviewed on, and I was like, I must have you in the second series. So perhaps you can start with sharing about My Grief Connection, what My Grief Connection does, and how you came to start it.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Yeah, so My Grief Connection is a website and social media kind of community, I guess you could say, for grief support and resources, tools, and information. I sort of created it to try to be a hub of all of that because I had a major loss a few years ago. And when I was in the midst of that grieving process of really, going through the roughest parts of that, I was frustrated that it was really difficult to find grief resources and support, to figure out where my local support groups were and when they were meeting, to find counselors and events that relate to grief and loss. And just, all of that stuff that you need as you're making your way and trying to figure out what this grief thing is. I had to search the internet, and it took hours, and I was just all over the place bookmarking things. And I just got kind of frustrated that there was not like one website that I could go to that really was the gateway to all of the information, and that could get me to where I needed without having to waste so much time searching. And it's really hard when you have that grief brain, that you're in that grief fog, to do that type of research. So even though I have a background in doing a lot of research kind of work and reference, I worked at a library for many years and did that for a living. So for me, it came fairly easy to do that. But even still, I was frustrated. And so I knew that other people must be having a hard time doing that kind of searching. I had a conversation one day with my counselor and was telling her about this frustration. And she said, you're right. It's really hard. It takes a lot of work to find those resources. And I wish it was easier, but maybe that's something that you could be part of finding a solution for. And that really kind of stuck in my brain. And I kept thinking about it for a few weeks and finally decided I needed to do something. And it was, I couldn't rely on someone else to kind of fix this problem for me. So I ended up launching a very basic website with just a couple of pages and some links to local grief support and counselors and some things like that I thought might be helpful. And I thought, if this helps one other person, maybe in my local area, get connected to some support, then that would be worth it. And it would help honor the loss that I was feeling, the people that I was remembering while creating the website. So yeah, I mean, it just kind of started really small. I just launched this one basic web page, and I didn't know what I was doing at all. When it comes to the tech part, I just had to Google and YouTube my way to figure it out. And I launched a Facebook and an Instagram shortly after the website, and it's just sort of grown since then. It's been about 2.5 years, and I'm just constantly adding and adding more resources and information to the website all the time. But the reason I started the website really was because of my own experience of loss and grief. The main instigator was that I lost my older brother, Skylar, and his fiance on the July 4th weekend of 2018. And my brother took his own life immediately after he took the life of his fiance. So this is what we call a murder-suicide or a homicide-suicide situation. It was a complete shock to all of us, you know, who knew them both. Not something at all that we had anticipated happening. We didn't know that there was anything, you know, really serious or dire going on in the relationship that would have, you know, caused this. So it was definitely a life-changing sort of loss that happened, and changed my life forever. You know, there's that before and after that people talk about in grief, that your life is one way and you see it kind of unfolding in a certain way, and then something like this happens and then your whole life and future changes. So that's sort of what happened to me. I lost my brother and his fiance, and I, you know, really went through a tough time that first year trying to wade through the grief and figure out how I was going to get through it and how I was going to keep going, and trying to find some sort of threads of, you know, hope, that life could get better, that the pain might lessen, that something possibly, you know, good could come after something so bad. And a lot of that, you know, was it was hard work. I had to do a lot of counseling and talking with other grievers and sharing my story, and doing a lot of inner work. But and that first year really was all of that hard work, and that sort of ended up accumulating into the birth of My Grief Connection. Actually, I launched My Grief Connection on the 1-year anniversary of their deaths. I literally was in a cafe that day working on my computer, creating the website on that day. And that was a way I could honor and remember them, and also honor my own grief, you know, like do something to help me process what I was feeling, and to help me transform some of that pain into something that was a little less painful. And now is something that I really cherish, being part of this community, and sharing my story with others, and helping others find some sort of hope and expectation that they can find healing and continue on in their lives and find something good to live for.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And it is truly inspiring to see what you've created in the midst of your grief. So such a wonderful resource for people to know about. And I know that from starting My Grief Connection, you've also created your own grief groups, which are specifically for people who are grieving murder, suicide. So perhaps you could share a little bit more about that.
So when I was looking for resources, I definitely did some searching to try to find murder-suicide loss support, and pretty much came up with almost nothing. There was maybe 1 or 2 articles, and I think a couple of books that I found that sort of were on that topic. And yeah, there just wasn't much of anything out there, and it was very frustrating. And I kept occasionally like doing another search, hoping maybe if I search it a different way or use a different term, something might hit. And last summer, I did one more kind of last ditch search because I was going to speak at an event, and I was trying to find another story from another survivor of something like this, so I could kind of get an idea of how people could even approach the subject. How do you talk about this publicly? And I happened to find an article that was published just 2 weeks before by another survivor of murder-suicide loss. She had lost her father and stepmother, and it was such a relief to hear somebody else talking on this, and it gave me some sort of comfort to know that I was not alone. And I ended up reaching out to her, and we connected and had a Zoom call. And for both of us, it was really the first time we had talked to another survivor outside of our own little circle of loss support, just within our families and friends. And so we just had this amazing connection, and it was such a feeling of relief to feel feel a little bit less alone, and to feel like somebody else kind of got it. And there's so many complexities in a murder-suicide loss that are different than any other type of loss, that there was just a huge relief to talk to someone else who kind of understood a little bit more about what that's like to go through. So we started connecting, and then eventually, as we were talking, she had a few people that saw her article and reached out to her that were survivors, and I had a couple people reach out to me because I had posted a video about me sharing about murder-suicide loss on my website, and I had a couple people that were also survivors reached out to me about that, and they were just so thrilled to find somebody else that they could kind of connect with on it. And so as she and I were talking, we were saying how maybe we should have like a Zoom call with all of us, this handful of survivors that we knew, that maybe that would be kind of like having a little support group. And then we're like, oh, well, we should just actually start a support group. We have enough people, we could do that. And so we launched our little support group for murder-suicide loss survivors last November. So it's been a little over a year. And we just started meeting every couple of weeks online on Zoom. And it's really, really grown. And we have quite a number of survivors now that are finding us, or that are reaching out. Some don't always want to join the group because they're not quite ready for that experience, but they do want to know that they're not alone, and that there are some resources and some people that are in this with them. So, but yeah, it's been a wonderful experience. It's been pretty much, for me, the most rewarding part of all of this is being able to provide this kind of support for other murder-suicide loss survivors. I just, get so much fulfillment from that. I hate that we have to have this group. Like, none of us really wants to be in it, but we also know that it's really important, because this is a problem. This is a type of loss that nobody's talking about. It's so stigmatized. And there's just really nothing out there for survivors of this kind of loss. And there's a lot of people hurting. There's 11 murder-suicides a week on average in the US. So that's over 500 something a year. And when you think about the ripple effect of all of the people involved on perpetrator and victim side, sometimes there's multiple victims. I mean, that's a lot of people that are grieving this type of loss that have nowhere to go. So it's really an honor to be able to be involved in a group like this and to be part of it. So it's become a big passion of mine to find more ways to support survivors and to speak on this topic.
Yeah, well, I really want to acknowledge you, for doing this work and bringing this light to people who are grieving, specifically murder-suicide. Like you say, there's a lot of stigma, and I think it's so great to have these specific groups, because it can be really complicated, and sometimes you just can't listen to other people in a group who are not going through the same thing, similar thing. So I think it's just such a brilliant resource that you've created. And you said earlier that you had some therapy for your own grief. So I was wondering, what modalities you have found to be beneficial in your own grieving process, and obviously now, like, being part of this group and community as well, so powerful.
Definitely. There's a lot of different modalities and tools that I've used, and those are things that, as I try things, things that work for me and that I hear from other people that are helpful for them, those are the types of things that I kind of, share about on the website, just because I know everybody grieves so differently, we all process things differently. So it takes sometimes a lot of different resources. We need to pull from all kinds of different areas to find the right support for ourselves, So I encourage people to try lots of different things and just see what feels like is a good fit for you. It's probably going to be a combination of a lot of things. But for me, I know that talking about it is really one of the top thing probably that has helped me the most is sharing my story, talking about it with family and friends. Finding professional support through therapy and counseling has been hugely helpful for me. And actually now I'm in graduate school studying counseling. So I'm going into sort of a career shift because it's been so helpful for me, and I want to be able to give back in that way to others if possible. So yeah, it's important to find a good counselor that understands grief and that understands loss and trauma, especially if you are experiencing grief from a sudden loss or a violent loss, a violent death, a murder, suicide, a murder, any of those kind of things. You know, you need to find the right fit for you. So I think that, you know, sometimes you might have to try multiple counselors to find the right one, but keep looking because there are good ones out there. I have a lot of information on the website about how to find a grief counselor and some ways to search for those. But definitely that was huge. For me, talking about it is really the way that helps reduce the shame and the guilt that come with these type of losses anyway, and not every type of loss, you know, invokes those kind of feelings as strongly, but something like this type of loss, I think, does. When I speak with other survivors of murder-suicide loss, they carry a lot of guilt and shame and guilt by association. And so for me, talking about it, being able to say what happened, say their names, has really helped me dissipate a lot of that guilt and shame. When you bring things out into the light, that's a place that shame can't live in. And so I just really encourage people to find someone, at least one person that they can talk to openly about all that stuff that's going on. And that for me has been just so helpful and healing. Just allowing myself to have time and space to grieve and give myself permission fully to just feel and cry or yell or scream or do whatever needs to come out at the time. I think if I try to stop myself or, you know, hold back or repress those things when they come up, you know, that's not healthy for me, and I don't think it's healthy for anybody. So finding, you know, a way to allow yourself to just feel those things when they happen in the moment, I think is really important. For me, faith and my faith and my spiritual practice and my belief in something greater than myself and in something beyond this world has really been huge in my whole process of recovery and healing. Prayer and meditation, reading scripture, devotional time, things like that have really helped me and given me so much peace and comfort. I know that's not for everybody, but I know people struggle with that. Some people are not at all religious or spiritual, but I think if you have any inkling or kind of thinking that you might want to kind of delve a little bit more into that side of things, I think you should give it a try, because for me, it's just been probably one of the very key top things that I've done is leaning into my faith and my spiritual side and finding some hope and peace there, and trying not to spiritually bypass, which is, you know, where you get overly spiritual and you're like, you know, it's all going to be, you know, everything's fine. And, you know, everything happens for a reason, those kind of platitudes and stuff, you know, like those things don't really help too much, I find. So maybe not leaning too far into that side of it is probably best. But, you know, just definitely allowing yourself the time to dig a little bit into those deeper kind of feelings and searching for some sort of solace and meaning.
You think
I think has been helpful.
Do you think it's almost strengthened your spiritual?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it has for sure for me. I feel like I have a much deeper spiritual connection now than before my brother died. Yeah, it's really forced me to lean onto my faith, and given me, I thankfully I had a lot of peace come into my heart after this happened, which is the opposite of what I thought is what would happen. But I've felt a lot of peace about it, and knowing that that he and she are both okay wherever they are, and that whatever issues they had between them, or whatever pain they both were carrying, is now, it's all been reconciled, I guess, and their relationship has been healed in some way. At least that's how I feel. I don't know. That's what's settled in my heart, that they're okay, and so that I don't have to carry so much of a burden for that, or feeling like I need to atone for what was done. I think I struggled with that in the beginning. It did take some time to get there, because in the beginning I felt such a connection to my brother, and I knew him so well, and I knew what he did was not reflective of who he was as a person, or the rest of his life. His final deed didn't define who he was, but that's hard to explain or defend to the world. But that's the feeling that you have as a survivor a lot of times, is that you want people to know that your person, even if they did something awful, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's who they were. It was their worst moment in their life, but that wasn't the totality of who they were, their character. So yeah, I mean, I feel like for a while, though, I felt like I had to defend him, and I had to do that. For me, part of that was feeling like I had to make up for what he did by doing as much good in the world as I could. And that's maybe a little of the motivation for starting my grief connection subconsciously. I don't know that I was thinking that like really on a highly conscious level, but I was like, oh, I have to do something to kind of, balance out like what happened. And if I can help other people, then maybe that will help balance the scales a little bit. But I've, come to realize that that's just not how it works. And have sort of changed my view on it. And definitely my motivation now is more just because it's what's right for me. It feels what's right for me is to be able to pass on any knowledge or wisdom or comfort I can to others that are going through something similar to what I went through. Hopefully that answers your question a little bit.
Certainly does.
Yeah.
I really hear what you're saying, and it was making me also think about you haven't had another brother,
yeah,
who passed when he was younger. So would you like to also talk about him? Yeah,
thanks for asking. Yes, I did have another brother. I do have another brother, but he died when he was almost 7. So he was a month shy of his 7th birthday. So his name was Stephen. And when he was little, my parents were actually Christian missionaries working in South Korea at the time. And Stevie was almost 7 and Skylar was 4 years old. And one day the boys were just outside playing behind kind of where the mission homes were. There was sort of a wooded area. And they were playing frontiersman because Stevie wanted to be Daniel Boone. That was his hero. And he had a toy rifle in his hand and his coonskin cap on, and they were just having fun outside. And that, for some reason, that one day Stevie decided to climb up this electrical tower. And he didn't realize it, but there was a low slung wire that was live, and he had his toy gun in his hand. And when that toy gun got too high and close to the wire, it caused a big electrical explosion and arc. And so he was electrocuted. So I had 30,000 volts of electricity go through him, and it ended up making a loud boom, and there was smoke and fire, and it burned his clothes off and his hair. And he was ended up sort of dangling by his foot, hanging on, to this pole. And Skylar was 4 at the time and watched this happen. He was right there looking up at his brother, probably about to climb up the pole himself. my parents heard the boom, of course, and were scared, and they came running to check on the kids and found Stevie like that. And they got him down and then realized he was actually still alive. So he survived the initial incident, but after about 33 hours in the hospital trying to treat him, he just couldn't survive. So he did pass away. And yeah, that was a huge trauma and a huge loss in our family. And I actually wasn't born yet. I was born 11 months after Stevie died. So I really was born into a grieving family, you could say. And my mother lost her father 3 months before I was born. So while she was pregnant and wasn't able to go home for the funeral or anything, because she was, not able to travel at that time. So definitely a lot of loss at the very beginning of my life, and coming into a family that was grieving. And for Skylar, as a 4-year-old, that's a lot of trauma for a 4-year-old to handle, to watch his older brother suffer and die like that. Very difficult. And I know that trauma really affected him for the rest of his life. And I believe, that was one of the things, not the only thing, but one of the things that led to some of his issues with his mental health and in his difficulties in relationships and things like that, some struggles that he had in his life. I think a lot of that stems to that early trauma that he had that wasn't ever really properly addressed and treated. So that's one of the things I'm passionate about as far as my own studies and counseling and stuff. I'm wanting to learn more about trauma and the effects of it, and how trauma and grief interact, and how they sometimes and often do go hand in hand. And so I think grief has really informed a lot of my life and who I am and my family and how we are, and how I grew up, and some of the things I believed about myself actually have a lot to do with the loss of Stephen, and coming in to the family right after his death. I know that it was a good thing and a blessing in a lot of ways, and my family was very glad to have a new baby and to have this new dynamic and everything. And it was probably very healing for them in a lot of ways. But as I grew older and kind of looked back on the situation and sort of put things together and realized timeline and everything in my kind of child mind, I thought that sort of meant that I was kind of replacing this other child that had died, and that I had to be, this perfect little angel kid to kind of make up and to sort of be able to earn my spot in the family. And I obviously now, as an adult and working through Skylar's loss, actually has been super healing with Stephen's loss as well. Like, doing the counseling and stuff that I've gone through for Skylar's loss, I realized I had a lot of grief about Stephen, about someone I never met. But his loss had a very big impact on me and my life and our whole family. So I think we sometimes underestimate losses that happen when we're young, or that happen before we're born, these kind of generational trauma and loss that can happen. I think we don't always realize what kind of an impact that has. And so, that's something I think about a lot, and that I'm studying to try to understand and try to help people with.
Yeah, I feel that you're going to make an incredible counselor. You're going to help so many people with your life experience. And as you say, nobody chooses to be in this field of work, but maybe that it is a soul's calling. And like, you were born into the family as a healer, and that's what you're going to be that's what you're doing now, and that's what you're going to continue to do. And it's very profound. Sarah,
really touching to me that you said that. Well,
it's absolutely true.
Hadn't quite thought of it that way, but that's a really neat way of saying it, of reframing it. I was born into the family as a healer.
Yeah.
Help me, help me, help me.
Yeah, but as you also said, that you have had this sort of even this guilt of being in the, replacing your brother, and then feeling the guilt of the older brother as being the survivor, and then trying to be perfect.
Yeah.
I see how this studying is going to be incredible for you.
Yeah.
Family systems and things like that. It's just so profound.
Yeah, I'm studying learning over the lifespan and lifespan development in this new semester that I'm just starting. So I'm really excited for that, because I feel like it's so important to understand, how we develop and how our brains work as we're going through the different stages. And I think that knowledge will really help apply to the grief work that I do, especially as I think about, how things affected my brother as a young grieving child, and how they affected me growing up, having not experienced personally that trauma and loss, but having experienced it in a epigenetic sort of sense, so it's super interesting. And I think sometimes we forget when we go through grief that, like, there's this history that affects how we grieve, and how long and how hard and why, and all of the things, attached with our grief and our growth and our healing. It's complicated, and sometimes we think it just has to do with this one incident, and if we could get over this one thing, then we'll be okay and we'll be back to normal. But we forget sometimes how intertwined things can be and how complicated. So yeah, it's just very interesting to me, all of it. So I think that's why, my grief, one of the reasons why my grief connection happened is just because I have so much curiosity and interest in these topics, and have this insatiable need for information. I really recommend to people that you spend some time doing some research yourself, reading different books and listening to podcasts and attending grief summits and series, listening to other people's stories, even watching movies and things like that. If you can tolerate it, those things can really help you understand the process of grief and how everyone experiences it differently. I don't know. For me, that was really helpful. I needed information to process my grief. I needed that constant input. I wanted to find out, like, how others are doing it, and that helped me inform my process of how I wanted to do it. It helped me pick those things that I thought were helpful. So, and I just wanted to mention too that one of the things I thought was the most helpful for me was tapping into creativity and using art in all different forms, to help with the grieving process and to help me get in touch with my emotions. So I think sometimes words are wonderful and they are very helpful. And I think, talking has helped me immensely, but sometimes there's a level that you can't get to with words. There's emotion that you just can't express because our language is so limiting. And the language around grief is especially limiting, I think. There's not enough words to really convey the true feelings of a griever. But art can kind of transcend that, I think, in a way. So I really encourage people to tap into that.
Did you class, or did you just sort of start painting on your own, or how did it come?
I did different things. I did some of my own, but yes, I did take some classes. There was a grief art class that I took that was online, and it had different modules, like 10 different modules. And each module, we did a different art project using kind of different mediums and different styles of art. And each module taught you some different skills and tools that you could use in processing and handling and holding your grief. And so that was extremely helpful for me. I've always loved art, and I did a lot of art in high school and college and stuff, but I kind of got busy with life and work and, didn't really do a lot of artsy things, maybe an occasional craft projects here and there. But I spent a lot of years just kind of letting my artsy side languish, and actually grief really helped get me back in touch with that. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah.
It's amazing, and it's really fun too. And you need any kind of moments of joy and fun that you can find when you're grieving. You have to have those breaks from the heaviness, and art can be a way to find that. So for me, I got back into doing kind of drawing and painting, and I found a new thing recently that I just started doing called neurographic art. And it's really interesting, and it was devised by a psychologist back, I think, in 2014. So it's not super old, but it's sort of an abstract kind of art form where it's very simple. You just draw on a page, like with a Sharpie or some kind of a dark pen, and you can draw all kinds of just any kind of shape that you want, loops and zigzags and hearts and circles and all kinds of things. And anywhere that your lines intersect, you curve those lines out. You go back through with your Sharpie and curve all of the intersections out. And darken the lines, and it makes this amazing, really cool design. And then you take color and color that in with whatever kind of medium, like crayons or watercolor or whatever. But the key to this is that before you start your piece, you turn the paper over and think about what's bothering you. What's the issue that you want to express, the feeling or emotion or whatever, and you write that on the back, even just a word or two. You could write a whole paragraph if you wanted to, whatever feels right, whatever you're kind of needing to kind of get out. And then you turn the paper over and you start your process of creating the art while thinking about what it is that's bothering you. And that helps kind of you get that out on the page, and your art sort of helps you express and process through what you're feeling. It's very new to me. I like literally just discovered this particular kind of art like a week ago. So, but I'm really excited about it because it's so far I've just really enjoyed it. It's very meditative, and kind of you have to really think, and you have to look at all of the little intersections and stuff, and spend some time like really working on that. And you have to, kind of concentrate on it. It helps you kind of forget and the other things that are going on. So that's one form that I've really enjoyed doing, and that's just recent. But I also like heart work journaling. There's a woman that I follow named Maritza Pera, and she does this specific kind of art called heart work journaling. And I've been through a lot of her programs, and I've found that super helpful. And she really teaches you emotions, and how to express emotions, and how to find those words for feelings through doing these little artwork, heart work, journaling, little projects. And I don't know how to explain it, but it's so fun. And it's also, you learn a lot about emotions and feelings. And so I don't know, those are the big things that have helped me, like doing the that one project grief class, and doing the heart work journaling, and then finding other little fun art things here and there, like the neurographic art, going to paint parties. I did a paint party on my 1 year, on the 1 year anniversary of my brother's loss, and painted this 4th of July sky scene for him that day, which I thought was extremely special because his name was Sky and he died on the 4th of July. And so that was something that I really, that really helped me to get through that day. So sorry, I could go on and on about how much art's been helpful for me, but also dance has been really helpful, not just like painting and drawing. I know some people have a hard time with that because they feel like, oh, I'm not an artist, but grief art is about the process, not the product. It's really about getting things out and getting things moving and expressing yourself. It's not about what the end product looks like. but also I think using your body and moving, whether it's walking or whatever, that's helpful as well. But dance for me has been something that's been really, really healing. I take an adult ballet class once a week, which I love, something that I loved when I was a teenager and got away from for many years. And going back to that has been really helpful and really actually very healing in a lot of ways. It helps, helps in so many ways. And socially it's really great because it's a place where you can make friends and meet people that are also interested in something that you're interested in. And that can be a good distraction.
On your website?
A lot of this, yes, most of this is on my website. Yeah, there's tons of information about all this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Yeah, this is all such helpful information to share. So thank you so much. And because we're getting to the end of time, just the last question is your own interpretation of conscious grief. What do you think? Conscious grief.
It's an interesting question, conscious grief. I thought about it a lot the other night and was trying to get some thoughts down, and this is kind of what I came up with. But I think, typically when we experience a significant loss, at least in kind of Western culture and society, we grieve unconsciously. Our tendency is to deny, delay, to numb, ignore, to fight, to run away, or to bury ourselves in our pain and grief. But the opposite of that is what I would call conscious grief. It's when we allow ourselves to be available to the experience and to experience all the emotions of loss without judgment and without completely losing ourselves in it as well. We can grieve more consciously when we let our curiosity about what's happening in us and to us and through us lead us without that relentless drive to just fix, cure, or obliterate our grief. We don't want that to push us forward. We want to be consciously thinking about how we can move in a healthier way forward. I think conscious grief really requires us to slow down and seek to be present and aware and just allow whatever loss has awakened in us to arise and to be heard and felt. And I think it also involves being that compassionate, tender friend to ourselves, the one that we wish was by our side when we're grieving. We all wish we had a friend that could just sit with us and just be there with us in it for the long haul without pushing us to be in a different place or to be better, quicker, faster. But sometimes we can't find that outside of ourselves. And if we could look in, slow down, we could actually be that for ourselves. And I think conscious grieving can, help guide us toward a path of conscious living. It gives us an opportunity to reconfigure our lives and to know ourselves more fully and to stay connected to those that we miss more deeply and to find some levels of gratitude and hope that we just never knew before, so that we can facilitate and further our own healing.
Oh my goodness me, this is unbelievable. Thank you so much.
Of course.
It was making me tearful when you were describing unconscious grief, because it just felt so what my experience was, when I, for most of my life. And I guess that's why I feel like conscious grief is kind of what I want to encourage and support people to do, because I really wasn't doing that for most of my life.
I feel that too. I mean, I definitely have been an unconscious griever for most of my life as well. It's not something I think it's not something that's necessarily natural to us. And that's because of conditioning, I think. It is probably natural and innate in us if we didn't have all of this social conditioning that we had laid on us. So it's maybe like uncovering our natural grieving process is sort of conscious grieving is, I guess, you know, how we were meant to grieve,
Yeah.
how we were created to grieve and feel that loss.
And maybe being willing just to feel the pain, because I think that's the thing. We naturally do everything we can to run away from it, but then we're missing the healing.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, definitely. I wish we could continue.
I know, so much to talk about.
So amazing to talk to you, and I'm so glad to share about My Grief Connection, because it's truly an amazing resource, and just getting to know you more, and I can see how, you know, you are somebody of great authenticity, and you're so articulate in what you share and the research that you do to help others. So I just really appreciate everything that you're sharing with the world.
Thank you so much. The feeling is mutual. I love all that you do as well, and how you share your heart so openly with everybody, and how you're getting this information out to people. It's so important that we learn how to grieve consciously.
It truly is. And thank you everyone at home for watching. Bye-bye.